Everybody, and welcome to another Motorsport Magazine podcast. We're going to look ahead to the 2015 Grand Prix season, and already it's looking like it's going to be an absolutely fantastic year. Lots of intrigue, lots of questions to answer, and who better to answer them than our editor-in-chief, Nigel Roebuck, our man on the road, Simon Arron, the editor himself, Damien Smith, and our Grand Prix man, Mark Hughes. What a panel. So let's get underway straight away. I guess we're going to talk about the top teams mainly. Mercedes-Benz, obviously. Are they going to run away with it again? We'll ask our experts about that. Ferrari, have they made a big leap forward? Did Alonso make the wrong decision? We'll see. Then there's Williams. Looks like the biggest challenger to Mercedes. And then there's Renault. And of course, the Renault engine, I'm talking about the Renault engine in the Red Bull. Have they got it to work a bit better? Okay, let's start with you, Mark. Mercedes, going to run away again?
I fear so, actually.
Oh dear, oh dear. What a depressing start.
The lap that Nico Rosberg recorded towards the end of the second Barcelona test very much suggests that. I think the others will have made progress. It certainly looks like Ferrari have. I think Williams are actually going to be closer than they looked in the test, and I expect Red Bull have got something in hand because they tend to run very conservatively in testing. So it'll probably be closer than, not quite as depressing as it looked at the second Barcelona test, but Mercedes still look to have a clear advantage.
So a fantastic race for second place, yeah?
Or third, yeah. Well, but actually, probably a fantastic race for first place because we saw several of those last year, yeah. And then fantastic battles all down the field. We saw several of those last year as well. So, it's just different seasons throw up different patterns, don't they? And there's always something to look forward to, and I think there will be some fantastic battles.
Good. Okay. Well, that sets the scene. We're actually going to take questions from you, the listener. You are Motorsport Magazine readers as well. So we'll start actually on Mercedes-Benz and one from Bill Thomas. And Bill wants to know, what will Nico have learned in 2014 about how to handle the inter-team relationship and battle with Lewis, and how will he be preparing mentally for 2015? Damien, what's your take on the Rosberg-Hamilton battle?
Well, I think by the end of the year, Nico was had been well and truly beaten. The S.p.A. thing clearly affected everything within the team and his relationship with the team, and he seemed to take a huge knock from Monza onwards. Really, you could see that, and it took. He never really recovered from that. The question now is, Nico's a really intelligent guy and has plenty of reservoirs of strength. Has he recovered over the winter to actually give Lewis a run for his money? I think he's, there's no reason why not, actually, because he's not just going to fold, I don't think, in this situation. I think it's all to play for, all starting again in Melbourne. Lewis's tail will obviously be up after coming off the back of that incredible run of races at the end of the year. But there's Nico's, he's his father's son, isn't he? He's not. He's as strong as they come. So, well, Nigel, what's your take on Nico?
Yeah, I think he is. I think mentally he is very strong. I mean, it's a matter. What can you learn? I mean, I suppose what he did learn last year is that in a race, by and large, usually he just isn't as quick as Lewis. So I don't know how you can sort of really what you can do about that particularly. I mean,
And he didn't pass him all year, did he? That's the thing as well.
No, I don't think he did.
I was going to say, my take on it really it wasn't so much the speed as the track craft, because every time you got down to a bare knuckle fight, even when Nico had a quicker car, clearly had a quicker car with a quicker tower, which we saw 2 or 3 times. Yeah, he was unable to pass Lewis just through sheer, force of will on Lewis's part, and I think that's the biggest separator between them personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Lewis truly is one of those people, isn't he? Fundamentally, his biggest enemy is himself. And,
Looks a bit like it sometimes, doesn't it?
well, I must say, when it was first splashed all over the papers and everything about the latest breakup with Nicole Scherzinger, I thought, because we all remember what happened 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, he fundamentally went to pieces, didn't he?
I know the feeling.
That doesn't seem to be the case from his demeanour in testing recently. That doesn't seem to be the case this time. But I just wondered if that might affect things, perhaps.
So a take on this Hamilton-Rosberg situation?
Yeah, that's always the question hanging in the air about Lewis, is his
fragility.
Yes, his emotional fragility. But he is aware of it. He is aware of his own weaknesses, and he even asks people in the team to help him with them, and says that even when they have done, he'll say, yeah, but you need to keep on that because I will do this again. And he is aware. He's very self-aware, actually, even though the front he gives is not that. But Nico, I think, will have got under his skin by out-qualifying him over the season last year. Nico he knows these are the defining strokes of his career, really. He's not going to get a car like this, and he's for very long, and he's fantastically in a fantastic position to get a lot of success. But he does have this mountain to climb in beating Lewis in the race over a season, consistently. He is, I think, better at fine-honing the car and giving himself. I think that's why we're seeing the qualifying advantage, because Lewis just seems to get the car a balance early in the weekend that he can live with, and he just adapts to whatever what comes after that, which is, I think, the pattern that you see in the races, because the car doesn't stay in the same balance the whole race, and so he just improvises his way around it, which Nico isn't quite as good at. So yes, Nico will have looked in all the fine detail in a lot more depth than Lewis, I'm sure. But yeah, I think fundamentally the pattern that we saw last year is just that is them. That's who they are. That they are their strengths and weaknesses, and I think we'll see a similar pattern.
Okay, well, we've pretty much answered Andy Gearing's question at the same time as Bill Thomas's, really, because Andy was talking about Lewis appearing to be in another dark mood following his breakup with the Scherzinger.
I'm still trying to get over the fact that you said, I know the feeling. Does that mean you've been dumped by a pussycat doll as well?
Yes. Been dumped by my team or by my girlfriend? Or both? Yes. Okay, we'll talk about that some other time. Okay, thank you for the questions. Let's move on to Ferrari. Wow. I wonder if they really have made the improvements they appear to have made, Mark. Dennis Keskin wants to know that if Kimi beats Vettel this year, will the world finally see Vettel for who he really is? A very good driver who happened to sit in the very best car.
That's a valid question. I stood and watched Vettel during that blown floor era, and there's absolutely no question that what he was doing with those cars was out of this world. It was incredible to watch, and that was real. But by the same token, he's not driving a car, a more conventional car, as well. He hasn't found an edge. He's still a very competitive driver. He did a fabulous race in Singapore as late as in the season as Singapore last year. He drove a fabulous race. But if you give him a conventional car with where you can't lean on the outside front tyre really hard, he doesn't look as though he's able to do anything with it. He's just brought down to the level, whatever level the car's at. He doesn't seem to be able to transcend it, which he was able to squeeze more out of the old type of car than even the car had to give on occasion. And that was real. So to say that he obviously wasn't doing anything special in that car, I don't believe, because I stood and watched it for, season after season, corner after corner, and it was when you see it close up, you can see how real it is.
Actually,
yeah.
Damien, Sebastian Vettel, Ferrari.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in Nigel's view of this, actually, because, Nigel, you've always, I think, struggled with the idea that a great driver cannot work around his style not suited to a car. So we've got this actually with both Ferrari drivers, haven't we? With Kimi's year was a complete write-off last year, and it's argued, and we've seen it with Kimi with tyres in the past as well. The wrong characteristics of the car he's completely lost. Is that a great driver?
Well, to me, a really great driver, you don't always have you're not always in Lewis and Nico's position, or you don't always have a car like that, and quite often in your career you're going to get junk. And to me, the litmus test of a great driver is not what he does when he's got all the cards in his hand, is how he copes when he hasn't. So I think a really great driver, will just always adapt to what he's got and make the most of it.
Yeah, a complete great driver will.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not to say that drivers that are less complete can't achieve greatness
if they
in
have
the right
to get the
circumstances.
car absolutely right. Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's what we're looking at with Sepp. But whereas somebody like Fernando is unquestionably a great driver in all circumstances.
I think the Vettel thing last year, and fascinating to find out more from him directly at some point this year, actually, is how he dealt with that internally, that realisation that he was a beaten man last year, and he knew it.
He did, and he's a very rational man as well. And so although he's deeply, deeply competitive and will have been tearing his hair out trying to understand how Daniel was able to do those things, i.e. go faster and take less from the tyres at the same time. And looking at all the traces and talking to the engineers, he will still ultimately have realised, I can't do it. I can't do it as well as that.
And that is so bad for your head in a sport where you need to feel.
But you see, to me, that's the same as Webber has always said. With the blown floor.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it as well as he could, and that's the end of it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Simon Arron.
All I was going to pipe up with was that I think we do well to remember second half of 2007 and the whole of 2008. I know the Toro Rosso Ferrari was a decent car then, but Seb did not just Monza in the wet, but he was consistently getting far better results with that than people were expecting. Maybe it was a better car than we realised. I don't know, but he was.
Well, it was a Red Bull.
I know,
effectively,
and with a better engine than the Renault had at the time. Yes, but the Red Bull wasn't quite as strong then as it has since become. And we did see real signs back then of. And particularly in the wet, think of Brazil 2008 and Monza that year as well, when you did see a real spark from a guy who didn't have the best car. So there were clues there then, I thought, as to what we saw evolve when he did have the blown floor Red Bull under
It's
him.
interesting when he was at BMW, when he was the Friday driver, and Kubica was one of the race drivers, that although you saw Vettel creating a bit of a sensation by heading the times on the Fridays. With soft tyres and extra revs and all the things that the Friday driver had. When they were analysing the numbers, they consistently came to the conclusion he's about 4/10 slower than Robert. And that's why they didn't battle very hard to hang on to him when Red Bull claimed him back.
But I won't argue with that.
No, but that puts... Robert was, I believe...
a special.
Very special. I actually believe he was the best driver. He'd become the best driver on the grid.
And actually, Alonso says that.
Alonso even says that,
yes,
that's true.
And Lewis has always made the point that coming up through the ranks, he was always the toughest adversary.
Yeah.
But you look at, going back to 2010 now, not 2015, but the three tracks where the driver makes a difference, particularly Spa, Suzuka, Monaco, and he put a car that should have been perhaps 7th or 8th on the grid, 2nd or 3rd every time.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
It's a shame we're not talking about Robert Kubica when we look ahead to the... Well, let me finish. Glad you don't come in that often. When we look ahead to the 2015 Grand Prix season, what a shame that we're not including Robert Kubica in the lineup. Thank you. You can edit that out if you like. Okay, staying with Ferrari, this question comes from Santiago. I don't know whether that's the city or the person, but anyway, it comes from Santiago. Do you think, Mark Hughes, whether Ferrari's pace is related to aerodynamics or the engine? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Both. I would say they've probably made greater gains with the engine, but I think they were relatively easy gains to make because last year's engine was compromised in its dimensions in terms of cooling and the whole car built around it in favour of aerodynamics, and they got the balance a little bit wrong. So the engine gains, I believe, are relatively easy, and there is talk of 80 horsepower more than they had last year,
wow,
which would put them on about a par with last year's Mercedes. But of course, Mercedes has advanced further, which is always the way. But I believe they've also got a better car aerodynamically as well, and certainly. The word from the test when Seb was looking at the telemetry of last year's car, and after he'd driven this year's car, he said, well, it's clearly night and day better than last year's car. Right. The question is whether that changes where they're at, because everybody's improving, but they have made a very, very big step forward in just car-on-car improvement.
Something to look forward to.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the key there, among other things, is going to be political stability as well. If they can, because after the year they've just had, where virtually everyone from the cleaner to the president got turfed out. If they haven't, James Allison, we all know, is a very gifted technical director. Saw some great cars from him with Enstone, Renault, Lotus, whatever it's called today. If he's allowed time to build up his own squad without any interference from on high, I think that's going to be absolutely critical as well.
Political stability in an Italian racing team.
Well,
right.
They had it for a very long time.
Look forward to that.
They had it for a very long time.
They did.
Todd Braun era.
Yeah, they did. They did with a Frenchman and an Englishman running it.
The key to that stability was the fact that Ross and John protected the internals of the team from the top management.
Absolutely.
And the worrying thing, because I don't know this for certain, but the word was that when Arriva Bene was appointed on the sporting side, that Ross was offered the role of team principal. Wow. And he was interested, but under certain stipulations. Yeah. In other words, I would imagine he wanted the same arrangement as before, whereby he runs it. Yeah. And apparently Marchioni couldn't agree to those terms. So that's a worrying, if that's true, that's a worrying sign for the future, because if you at that level, running an F1 team is far too intense to be able to do it at that level from so high up, two steps removed. Sure. You have to have somebody in the field who actually runs it properly.
I tell you what, if I was Arriva Bene and I was offered Ross Brawn, I'd take it, wouldn't you? Nigel.
Arriva Bene seems to be, he certainly seems to be on a communication level somewhat better than Mattiacci, doesn't he, already? I mean, Mattiacci, was a catastrophe, wasn't he?
Yes, absolutely.
He was. And it's very interesting. I thought it was interesting. Anyway, I'd love to know what the story is there, because why, when he was pitched from the F1 team, was he pitched from Ferrari full stop? I mean, after all, he arrived with a pretty powerful reputation. Sure. As in terms of how many Ferraris he flogged in the USA and so on.
Probably best we don't speculate.
Well, I'm just interested.
Absolutely,
I would love to know.
Well, Anyway, I think we've got to move. We've got to move on, because we're trying to cover the whole of the 2015 season to look ahead to it. Anyway, so if we move on to McLaren, drama. Federico Pinheiro de Mello, he wants to know: do we really know what happened to Fernando Alonso? Are we looking at a similar situation to what happened to Dario Franchitti and actually to Gilles de Ferran, in fact? Mark, let's start with you, because, so much speculation, so much gossip, if you like. Do we know what...
No, we don't. And I don't think anyone does, because I think it's fair to say that the team don't fully understand what they see on the telemetry from the accident. They know there was no problem with the car, They know he was braking and changing down right up to the moment of impact, but they don't understand everything they're seeing on the telemetry, and Fernando can't tell them because he can't remember from the concussion. So no, at this moment in time, it is mystery. He lost it on the artificial grass. His accident was very similar to the one Pastor Maldonado had at the same corner in practice for the Grand Prix last year. So it's not an unusual accident, and the winds are very high. So yes, it's we know that it was conventional. It began in a conventional way.
Yeah, sure.
What happened between him losing it and the first impact is a bit of a mystery.
Damien, I mean, this is obviously it's a big story, but yet again, I mean, the speculation. A guy takes a very bad bang on the head, and it's probably best he doesn't race a fortnight after that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a given, isn't it? I mean, with this sort of concussion, a second bang could be very, very serious for him. So it's the right decision for him not to race in Australia. And I think the question is, will he race in Malaysia? And if he doesn't race in Malaysia, then there's going to be some serious ramifications for the team and some even bigger questions to answer. I think one of the interesting elements about this is that it's McLaren this has happened to, and I think there's a lack of trust when it comes to McLaren these days because of the way the team is managed.
It's interesting, yeah.
And I think it's sometimes hard to take them at face value when Ron Dennis is in charge. I think it was different in the Martin Whitmarsh era, but there's a lot of history there, isn't there? And I think the way they've handled it from a media point of view has been a little bit strange.
They've almost caused more speculation and intrigue.
Yeah.
They've raised more. I mean, they've raised far more questions than they've answered. I mean, the most recent press release at the time of speaking had a whole paragraph telling us how well Fernando was and how he was great, nothing was wrong with him. Then second paragraph said but, and then paragraph 3 came to the point, which is, oh, by the way, he can't race in Australia. And if they just went and said, right, he's had a nasty concussion, doctors say a second one could be very serious, you'd accept that. And it is. I mean, it's been a subject much discussed in international sport of late. Rugby players have been sidelined for several weeks because of a concussion. Footballers, there's now advice. I mean, I played Sunday League football in Altrincham in the 70s, and I got kicked in the head quite often as a goalkeeper. It was part of the job. But
you're okay now, are you?
No.
You never got over it.
But I mean, goalkeepers now getting a bang on the head. The advice is get off the pitch. And there's a very moving interview with a rugby father on the radio a few weeks ago. His teenage son had been concussed, and as kids are wont to do, back on the pitch next weekend, same thing happened, and he died on the pitch. So, I mean, there is no question, as Damien said, that, I mean, there was all these people saying, oh, well, he's had a million volts go through him or whatever. I mean, there is no question that
I don't think so.
The secondary concussion within weeks of the first can be dreadfully serious.
Sure, absolutely.
So, but as everyone has said, I just think that the media management of the whole thing has been a bit sketchy.
I think part of the problem is that the impression has been that for a start they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, are they? Only Ron knows why he told the world that Fernando wasn't concussed, and God knows. But in point of fact, years in the 20 years ago, a NASCAR driver, Neil Bonnet, who had a bang on the head several times, was a top driver, won a lot of races, but he retired on medical advice, and he did commentary for 3 or 4 years, and then was offered a car for the Daytona 500 in '94, and he'd missed it desperately, and he just couldn't resist and accepted it. And in practice was involved in somebody else's accident, hit the wall, not particularly hard, in fact. But they took him out of the car, he was dead.
I think the more, the more interesting part of this story really is how the accident occurred rather than what is the matter with Alonso right now. Because, anyway, Mark, do you think we'll all know exactly what happened one day or not? Probably not, actually.
Probably not, unless Fernando's memory comes back.
Sure. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on and try not to be too biased, because we're going to talk about Williams. And Scott sends in a good question, which is, if Williams is able to maintain its 2014 form, do we think it's possible, or even likely, that they will attract a manufacturer either as a works engine supplier or as an investor? Because at the moment they have a customer Mercedes engine, Mark. Is Williams on a gradual upward curve? It is, isn't it?
Yes, I'd say it is. I think the Mercedes engine has helped them enormously in becoming more competitive, but at the same time, they've built a structure and taken full advantage of that to get them back on an even keel. And yeah, if you were a manufacturer looking to go into a partnership with a team, they'd be
a good one, yes.
Right at the top of the list. They're probably hoping that it happens not quite immediately, because they currently have a big engine advantage. But yeah, we'll see.
Damien, we like Williams doing well, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I think last year they not all the pieces were quite in place to they didn't quite have the killer instinct to actually deliver the one or two wins that maybe they could have done. It'll be interesting to see if that's changed this year. I think they'll be competitive. I mean, what Mark, Bottas for you is just ready and waiting, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, if Bottas and a Mercedes would be fighting for the championship, I'm sure, just as Nico and Lewis would. Whether he's able to bridge the gap, I don't know, because I think it's still a significant gap. They feel they're about 7/10 off, which puts them in play for best of the rest. But that's asking a lot for a driver to find that. But there are days when things fall in your favour that they should be around to benefit, pick the pieces up.
What do we think about the job Massa does? Because I know that people in the team rate him, and I just wonder whether it's time to give someone else a shot at that seat.
I think he probably suits Williams' needs right now. I mean, when Pat Simmons was in for a podcast a few months ago, he made the point that he doesn't think the team in its current state of evolution is ready for a real sort of Alonso-style top liner. So I can see that Massa, as things stand, he'll do a very solid job. He'll score loads of points. He'll get a few podiums. And I think where they are now, that's probably a very comfortable fit. They haven't got a car that's going to challenge for the title. With the best of respect to Massa, just somebody who can do a good, solid job, I think, is probably about right now. But I think next year you might well be hunting for somebody of a slightly higher calibre, personally.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Felipe is he's never been the most consistent driver. You look back over it. I mean, apart from that period of Ferrari when he, could and maybe should have been world champion when he was winning. Yeah. But otherwise, he's always been a bit up and down. But even now, he can still produce a performance that can surprise you. I mean, look at the end of last season. Look at Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. No, he can still string a lap together.
Yeah, he can.
It's not stringing 4 or 5 of them together to the same 10th is not what he does. But he is quick. He's very quick.
But shouldn't they have someone who should be stringing them together? Someone who could actually be challenging Bottas every week. I mean, Bottas last year, amazing consistency in the second half of last year.
Yeah.
It was he was taking the team where you think they should be. Shouldn't the second driver be doing that week in, week out as well?
I guess the thing is that a year ago they weren't in a position to be attracting a really top driver, were they? Would that be right? And now perhaps they are. And who would that be? I guess that.
Yeah, that's the next. It's quite difficult because they're going to be
still budgetary considerations with Williams. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, as you were saying when Pat was in to do the podcast, and it was at the time when Alonso looked as though he was going to leave Ferrari, and And we said, well, what about, and he just said, we're not ready for Fernando in 2015. 2016, maybe, but 2015, no. But interestingly, when I said the same thing to Rob Smedley in towards the end of the year, he said, Jesus, I'll have him tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry to have, we skipped over McLaren quite quickly. I just wondered if I could get everyone's opinions on where they're at, because the headlines are they've had a terrible winter, dreadful pre-season testing in terms of reliability. But Mark, you've written on the website suggesting that actually pace-wise they could well be not far off.
Yeah, I mean we've no idea from testing, because the thing is never run cleanly, and they've been run in very detuned form because of the reliability concerns. But the little feedback there's been from the drivers and observations from the circuit is that car looks pretty good, and it should be, because it's essentially a Red Bull by the look of it. The contours are remarkably similar. So if it's aerodynamically as good as a Red Bull, which you suppose it should be, all that Honda needs to be is just okay, and the car is competitive. Not with the Mercedes perhaps, but if Honda's done a really exceptional job once it gets past through, we don't know what the performance of that engine is, and it could be that it's brilliant. What if it turns out to be a brilliant engine? Then it's something. So I think that is the most intriguing unknown as we go into the season. Just how quick is that car? We've no idea.
And the other thing I'd say, just while we're on that, is that if it does turn out to be fundamentally a very, very good car, I also don't think there'll be as much of a gap between Button and Alonso
absolutely.
As people
if it's a well-balanced car, that's a very closely matched contest.
I think if it had been last year's car, I don't think Jensen would have gone near Fernando. But in a car, I think he'd be.
Yeah, so do I.
But it would be unusual, wouldn't it, if Honda didn't produce a great engine, wouldn't it? I mean, if you look at, on average, over the decades.
There's two schools of thought on that. You could say it's got a fantastic heritage, and it's one of the great R&D driven industrial concerns in the world, and all those things. But you could also say the last great F1 engine it did was a quarter of a century ago. And that the V8 and V10 ones were nothing special. Yeah. So, take your pick.
I mean, I know for what it's worth, and we'll never know, will we? But the Ross did say to me once that the engine that never was, the engine that they should have had in 2009 when Honda abruptly quit. For whatever reason, Ross was absolutely convinced it was going to be a sensational engine, and of course it was just.
The Merc wasn't bad though.
Put away in the corner. Huh?
The Merc wasn't bad though.
No, it wasn't bad. No. But he actually said that he had been looking forward to that season. He was absolutely sure Honda were going to be right on it.
I think the car itself looks great. It really does. I mean, when I say looks great, I mean it looks like a really good racing car. You know how some do and some don't, which I guess is no surprise with one of the cleverest men at Red Bull joining McLaren.
Yeah, quite. There's certain angles it looks better than others. Rear three quarters it looks beautiful. Yeah. Side on not so good.
Yeah. Okay, that answers very neatly Paul Makowski's question. So, thank you for reminding me, Damien. Hope you won't be seeing me later. Right, let's take one final question. We just go quickly back to Williams. It's a quick question from Sean Martin, who says that behind the boyish smile of Valtteri Bottas, he thinks he sees an assassin. So he'd like to see him move to a bigger, better team. What do we know about the contractual situation, Mark?
He's managed by Toto Wolff. I think it was interesting that during the off season, because Lewis is still not signed a contract beyond the end of this year
for £1 million a week or something,
or whatever. That Toto was very public about. Well, if we can't do a deal with Lewis, we'll look at Fernando or Valtteri. I think that's
It is rather extraordinary the way it is these days with some people, isn't it? The sort of talks are beginning, and then 3 months later, talks are continuing. You think, what the hell are they talking about?
Money.
Yes, well, exactly. But why does it take months and months and months?
Because he wants twice as much
Yes,
as they want to pay.
exactly.
I don't know, when I talk about money, it takes about a minute and a half. Because the answer's usually no.
But it's like, you know, it's like sort of a huge movie and trying to sign, you know.
Well, you have also now got 8 layers of management dealing with every layer.
Well, I don't know. I think if a racing driver is asking for £1 million a week, I think you'd need to spend a little bit of time before you decided whether or not.
I think I might have certain advice for him.
Okay. Okay.
Don't bother me.
Which brings us very, very neatly onto the finances of Grand Prix racing. And Michael Jobin, or Jobin, it can't be. It could be either, couldn't it? Sorry, Michael. Force India and Sauber not in fantastic shape, we understand. Marussia scraping in for 2015 with an updated 2014 car. Mark, things are better than they were towards the end of last year, aren't they? Because Bernie Ecclestone has now given money, I understand, to Sauber and Force India to help them out. Do you think we'll have all the teams left by the end of the year?
I don't know. I wouldn't be confident in saying that. I really don't. No, the business model is wrong and flawed. And it's one thing advancing TV money to keep cash flow going. But the big teams have got too much of the slice that's left after the owners have taken their slice. And the 3 teams that are left, they still have to build a car that is competitive, or try to build a car that's within 107% of the big teams on a fraction of the budget, and don't get anything like the income. Even if they do well, they don't get anything like the income. And it's had a knock-on effect. The Marussia and Caterham thing, what you don't see is the difficulty the suppliers to those teams will put in. And that has had a knock-on effect onto Force India, for example, because the suppliers were now, because of they'd been stung by the Caterham Marussia, they needed money in advance, which impacts on the cash flow of the smaller independent teams. And so they were late starting because they couldn't pay until late. And so they're now 2 steps behind, having only, just started their test program. So that you can see how it's a vicious circle, and it's nowhere near resolved. I wouldn't say we're in a better shape at all.
Can I just throw in a bit of bloke maths I did a week or 2 back? I think Mercedes' current budget is about, what, 300 million euros, 350, something like that, something of that order. Last year, Nico Rosberg pole up in Monaco, I think it was a 15.9 something. Jolyon Palmer pole up in Monaco, GP2 was 4.8 seconds off. It costs 1.5 million euros a season to run a GP2 car. It costs about 150 million euros a season to run one of those Mercs. Now, you're comparing apples and oranges because, one's a spec racer off the shelf. One team's got to research, design, develop its own cars, etc., etc., etc. And there are more races in far-flung places and bigger teams and so on and so forth. But, going from 1.5 million to 150 million to find 4.8 seconds, all right, might be a bigger gap around a longer circuit, it would be 7 seconds or something. The scale is just wrong to me. The scale just seems bizarre.
It's that scale because the money was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before the crash.
Yeah.
So because it was there, that's what it cost.
Yeah, I know, but it's just wrong.
Then you're left with the great big huge white elephant factories, but no money.
Yeah.
So therefore you have to take the money that could be spread more equitably otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Therefore you have the little teams going out of business.
But you just, on a fraction, a tiny, tiny fraction of what they're spending, you can cultivate decent performance.
Yeah.
A cost cap is the only logical
No, I
way
agree.
of going.
I agree completely.
And yes, it's much easier said than done, but a cost cap and a vicious one is the only way to do it. And then you can open out the technical freedoms.
Absolutely. Well, something I've been banging on about for years. I'd love to see just a single sheet of A4 as the regulations. This long, this wide, this high, this minimum weight, and if it runs on hot chocolate, fine.
It has to pass the safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
Yes,
the safety tests.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can't spend more than this, but you can do what you want.
Absolutely. And so if it runs on hot chocolate, fine.
Yeah.
And we've got the Dread Strategy Group. And I think, we've agreed so many times for so many years that, fundamentally all the problems Formula One has go back to Max selling the rights to Bernie for bugger all, and which Bernie then moved on at certain profit and put the business in most people's hands into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
But I think, that's one thing. And the other thing that I really hate about modern Formula One is the strategy crew.
Even the people in the strategy group are agreeing that they can't agree anything.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I just don't like the idea that certain competitors have a say in Formula One and certain competitors do not. I just think it's...
As Mark says, the business model is flawed.
Yeah, a year ago we published our manifesto of how we would fix the sport if we were given the reins, and every issue of the magazine and regularly on the website, this subject has been covered, and we've been very outspoken all the way through about what's wrong and how it's broken, and we'll continue to voice that when without trying to bore people, because it's repeat. You feel like repeating ourselves over and over again on this subject. The thing that concerns me is how do we actually how does it actually happen? How does the restructure happen? How does the sport fix itself without actually collapsing first? Because there doesn't seem to be and there's no one with power or desire to actually fix it as it stands. The strategy group, we just said, that's not an answer. Clearly, they can't decide, anything at all. No. Is the only way for this to work is for this, for more teams to go and for the sport to implode?
I guess one thing is that if you took away CVC, who are creaming off a lot of money, and it was run by a dictator, one dictator, who had the will.
I thought it was.
Well, it isn't really though, is it?
Because he's an employee at the end of the day.
The thing is, that's not going to happen anyway, because if
CVC was almost replaced.
If CVC sold their share, someone else would buy it, and we'd be in the same boat, because it would be another.
If they were enlightened enough to put in a dictator,
it would be more the same, wouldn't it? I mean, it's just the same in MotoGP. Dorna is owned by a
private equity group.
What Ken Till used to call a bunch of asset strippers. So it's exactly the same. And in MotoGP they hate I'm trying to remember it's the name of the company that owns Dorna, but they're about as popular in MotoGP as CVC is in Formula One. It's inevitably it's going to happen, isn't it?
I've long felt a lot of the problems of Formula One would go away if 80% of the money disappeared.
Yeah.
Yes. It would become much, much simpler. Have the commercial potential, but so what?
Maybe, I mean, say if we lost, say, 2 or 3 teams in 1 year, that would be dramatic, and then maybe there'd be action.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay.
And as Rob Walker would say, there'd be much nicer people in the paddock.
I mean, as things stand, Rob, we've lost a couple and nearly a third since 2012, and still nothing's happened.
Okay. Simon Ems, question from Simon. Justin King, who used to run Sainsbury's, is now helping Manor. Simon wants to know, is this any evidence of Mr. Ecclestone planning a succession? The fact that Justin King has come in from a company like Sainsbury's with a Formula One team. I would say no. What would you say?
I suspect no, but it's interesting that is someone like that wants to get involved. No, I don't think it's a succession plan.
No.
Someone like that wants to get involved. Well, he's got a son who's racing in GP too. Might I mean, that might be a longer term part of the strategy.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. and the team has been saved by the man from OVO Energy.
Yeah.
You'd have thought he'd have gone to Formula E, wouldn't you, really? Okay, let's talk about, I was going to say power units, but actually I want to say engines, so we're going to talk about engines. Kevin Joyce, question from Kevin. Have Ferrari or Renault or Honda, do we think, copied any of the Mercedes, anything about the Mercedes engine coming into this season? Mark, do you think, is that...
I think in broad terms, there's probably been a rebalancing of the compromise between mechanical and electrical energy, which Mercedes got hit the nail full on straight away. But in terms of specific design features like the Merc's front-mounted turbine, no.
No, because
but there is, we believe, a Mario Ilian-led upgrade of the Renault due mid-season. It will be interesting to see if that takes any lead from the Mercedes power unit. But the one that they're starting the season with is essentially it has different balance between mechanical and electrical energy, more towards the Mercedes philosophy. But in terms of the hardware, it's a compressor and turbines in a conventional place, just as is the Ferraris. The Hondas is slightly different, but it hasn't copied the Mclaren.
Yeah. Okay. It's all again exciting and intriguing, isn't it? Damien, what's your take on the whole engine, the current engine situation in Formula One, where we, unlike the WEC, which is a much more interesting situation as regards hybrid, actually, than because Formula One is incredibly restrictive. The rules are fantastically restrictive, aren't they? I mean, you can't. There's very little anyone can do within the rules.
Yeah, I once asked Andy Cowell, why Formula One couldn't go down a similar route to the ACO in terms of how they open up the engine rules, and he said it's too political. That was his answer. He was very, very dismissive, and basically said that the likes of Audi would have too much influence and writing the rules, and it becomes then who has the power in terms of who can actually get, and you end up with balances of performance, which isn't in the ethos of what Formula One's all about. But you have to say, in sports car racing, it does appear to work. And I mean, for me, the most interesting car we've had launched this year is the Nissan. Nothing to do with Formula One. So I don't know, Mark. What do you think on that? Is there scope for an open formula?
In engine competition, I mean, there would be if you put a cost cap in place, which brings us back to where we were before. But without it, no, because if you just give everyone unlimited technical scope and unlimited money, then whoever was the most committed would dominate, and the rest would go, and that, then we're left with spec formula essentially. Yeah. So no.
But the current engine formula in Formula One, for me,
I think it's
worked.
It's not bad. Yeah.
I agree. I think it needs more power. I've known, because I see him, and Nicky has been the last 24 hours been on again about these things are too easy to drive.
Nicky Lauda.
Yeah. He's sort of saying, sure, Verstappen is extraordinarily talented, but it shouldn't be the case that you can simply, at that age, jump from what he was doing into Formula One and take to it instantly.
But it's, I mean, I think
there's something in it.
We were talking about this in the last podcast, that there is a conflict between making the cars more demanding to drive and how good they look on track, because what to us looks fantastic is seeing them struggle to put the torque down onto the road, and being busy with the steering, and using bits of track that didn't even know was there in the V8 era. Looks fantastic, but to them it's just child's play. That's easy. For them, the demanding stuff is the heavy downforce cars, which to stand and watch looks dull. So if you make the cars truly demanding for the drivers, give them so much grip that it really sorts them out for the boys, they look terrible. So that's the modern dilemma. So you can't have it both ways. We have to make a choice of what we want. Do we want it to look fantastic and spectacular from the outside, but for it to be fairly self-leveling in terms of the top echelon of drivers, or do we want it to sort the men out from the boys, but for it to look dull? Because that's essentially what we have.
I mean, in terms of entertainment, if we're looking at it from was that an enjoyable race point of view? There was a string of races last year, which were just fabulous.
In those terms, it was the best season for a long time.
Despite the fact you had one team dominating.
Yeah, and there's so much negativity around the sport because of the business aspects of it that it sort of feeds on itself, and it's a shame because there is the cars are fantastic to watch, and so there was some fantastic racing last year. And when you're reminded of that, when you look back to some seasons that are remembered as the good old days, and they were awful. When you look back at them, when you look at YouTube videos of them now, you think, God, how did we watch that?
We haven't talked about Red Bull, and we should, because Adrian Newey will be taking less of a role in things this year.
Really?
Are you sure?
I'm not convinced about that.
I'm throwing out a point for discussion, and you want to discuss it. I can tell.
Yeah, well, it was Adrian that decided he was going to step back, but I don't know, he seems to have stepped back in. He's prowling up and down the pit lane at testing. He's still a part of the technical group. He still feeds into the technical group. And basically Christian said, well, you can be as involved as you want to be. And he's played a blinder in that he's prevented him going elsewhere, which is, was the number one priority. But he's left it open for him to be as involved as you want. I suspect him, because you can remember when he left McLaren to come to Red Bull, one of the things he wanted was to work a 3-day week. Christian said, fine. And I think by the 4th day he was there, he'd already broken that. So, so I think something similar might happen again.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a competition junkie, isn't he? He's completely hooked.
Absolutely.
And the biggest competition out there is Formula One, and you can't leave it alone.
And I think every now and again he has a crisis and thinks, I really should be doing something else. And then it's easy to decide that, but it's less easy to...
Well, he did consider
replace it with
the America's Cup, didn't he? But he decided actually that it was as much travelling as Formula One.
Yes.
so may as well stay where you are. Okay, but Daniel Kiveat. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the young guys. We've got Carlos Sainz Jr., we've got Max Verstappen, we've got Daniel Kiveat, we've got Felipe Nasr, Marcus Ericsson. Blimey. This is something to look forward to. One of them might be a huge surprise.
Yeah, I think so. Verstappen comes with a huge expectation around him. I think there are people who have worked with him who swear he's the best driver they have ever seen. There are people comparing him to Senna. Helmut Marko's already comparing him to Senna. So he has a lot to live up to. And you don't envy him having that sort of buzz around him, but it just adds to the challenge, doesn't it? And I think that is going to be one of the stories of the season, watching how that all develops.
Yep.
He's also guaranteed to be the youngest Formula One driver ever, isn't he, under the current regulations? Yep. I mean, I was grabbed by an engineer, a junior race team engineer, a lot of F1 experience, somebody I respect, at Silverstone last year, and he just bounded over to me and asked me if I'd seen Max Verstappen racing. And I said no, and he spent 20 minutes telling me that he was just the best. He wasn't working with him, he was racing against him. And he just said, his racecraft and everything else, for a guy of that age, he said it was the best he'd seen at that time. Of the others, I'm intrigued by Carlos Sainz, because any other driver on the Red Bull programme would have been pitched long ago. I mean, he didn't do that well in British Formula 3. He got blown off in GP3. Yeah. And still they kept him on, and he won the Renault 3.5 championship last year, fair play. Not sure the depth of competition was as strong as it might have been in other series, but I mean, it's odd for Red Bull to keep. I know he's got a famous name and stuff, but
why did he stay on and Felix da Costa didn't?
Well, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely, because Felix da Costa at the end of 2012, wasn't it? When he just won Macau, he'd
Yeah,
been winning races.
he
Looked
really
absolutely,
did.
but there was no space. And when the music stopped,
Yeah.
he was in the wrong place. And I mean, he's still with Red Bull, but he's doing flipping DTM.
Well, it seems to be the
it's
case
odd.
every 2 years they have a clear out at Toro Rosso, don't they? And if you happen to be in the right place at the right time, then
But I mean,
you know.
I mean, even now, I mean, had I been Helmut Marko 6 months ago, I'd have been getting on the phone to Antonio Felix da Costa and saying, right, we've got Vettel's moving on, we're shifting Kiveat upstairs. Come and have a go. Given his track record relative to Carlos Sainz's. I mean, I know Sainz did have a good season last year, but prior to that, he'd been fairly disappointing. And in GP3, his racecraft was appalling sometimes. He had some shocking accidents in silly places, just through desperation, it seemed. But, you know, maybe, I mean, I remember chatting to Christian Horner a couple of years ago, and he said when he tested the Red Bull during the young driver tests, he had been very impressive. So maybe, for whatever reason, with the properly powerful car, it'll suit him.
Maybe one of those guys.
It's an interesting thing, as we were talking before we started recording about, you know, both Kevin Magnussen and Max Verstappen are very different characters to their fathers, both of whom, you know, were the next big thing when they came in, and it didn't quite happen for them. And until they actually get there into Formula One, no matter what they've done in the junior stuff, it really almost counts for nothing, doesn't it? Until they actually get there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Felipe Nasra, Marcus Ericsson.
Yeah, Nasra can drive a car fast. He is quick. His racecraft in GP2 was not good initially, but he developed, didn't it?
He did. I mean, towards the end of last year, he had a couple of good races where he was passing. But I mean, when he was leading a race out front on his own under no real pressure, he looked very convincing indeed.
He ain't going to be doing that this year, though, is
but
he?
I mean, if you wanted a racing driver, with the emphasis on racing out of GP2 last year, you'd have taken Joe Palmer every day of the week, because I mean, his racecraft is fantastic.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, Nasr's not. You know, he's not a muppet. He can
justify a place in Formula One.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But there were question marks, but certainly about as much as about his racecraft. Marcus Ericsson gets a lot of flack because he's bringing, I believe, 18 million reasons rumoured to be in Formula One. But
wow.
I mean, again, he didn't convince in GP2 as his record in Formula 3 suggested he should have done. But again, he won the Japanese Formula 3 title. You know, he's not. And towards the end of last year, when they got the steering sorted to his liking, he came on much better, didn't he?
Yeah, and they gave him the updated car. He was suddenly quick. Suzuka was where it suddenly switched on.
Suzuka, where he'd raced a lot, admittedly, but yes, suddenly,
but he was,
absolutely.
It was looking good there.
Good, tons to look forward to. I can't wait, actually. Well, we don't have to wait very long. It's a week, isn't it? Wow, yes. This time next week.
Mark's just been sitting around all winter waiting.
Yes. I wanted you to say that, not me. Because
he's hibernation for the winter.
He's actually rather close to me, you know.
Screen save mode. Nothing happens.
Okay. It would be fun if we were all going to Australia, wouldn't it? That'd be good, but we're not. Okay. Let's sum up 2015 Grand Prix season. Mark, you said at the beginning that you feared that it would be Mercedes all over again, but you think in general the racing will be a lot closer?
I think that the gap will have closed. I'd be surprised if they win all but 3 races in 2015 like they did in 2014. But it's difficult to look past one of the Mercedes drivers for the title. But certainly in the second half of the season, I'd like to think that we might see them being challenged on a more regular basis.
Yeah. And Damien, how do you think it'll all go?
I think it's very hard to see past the Lewis Hamilton Championship at this stage. You know, could be proved wrong. Have been in the past many times, but you know, it's hard to see past that as it stands. But there's nothing to suggest that we're in for a dull season. I think there's just so many fascinating unknowns heading in. You know, the McLaren Honda thing is amazing, and I do, you know, from Alonso's point of view, from a personal point of view, I hope he's okay and that he comes back and he's his old self. But you know, seeing how he's going to fit in with that whole scenario is going to be amazing to watch, and against a fully fit Alonso against Jenson Button. The Red Bull situation, the Ferrari situation, is this Kimi's last year? Can he actually do anything about Vettel? You know, there's a lot to look forward to. I think we're in for a cracking year.
Nigel Roebuck, how many Grand Prix seasons have you seen? I'm trying to think. It must be
Seasons.
Yes.
Entire seasons.
Yes. Goes back to the 70s anyway.
Well, yeah. 70. I started covering it in 71.
So here comes another one. Are you as excited as ever?
In many ways, yeah, I am. I mean, I my beef with the state of Formula One, apart from the whole money situation, which we've talked about, is that it's so complicated. And I'm convinced if the support for Formula One and among the public is waning, I'm convinced that's one of the reasons. I remember a couple of months ago, a friend of mine who's sort of very interested, not fanatical, but always been very interested. He rang me up one night and he said, tell me, what the hell are engine tokens?
We come back to cost and putting a cap on it. Because
absolutely right.
That's the only reason that nonsense exists. Yeah. It's because the sport would bust itself if it wasn't there. Absolutely. So they are solutions. They're band-aids to a problem rather than going to the root cause of the problem. And nobody's grasping the nettle.
No, they're not something you get in health.
No, I mean Mark's right. That there absolutely has to be a cost cap, and as long as there's
sure. But
strategy group,
despite the complications,
I don't see it coming. But as far as the season's concerned, I mean, I think I agree with what everybody said. I'd be amazed if the championship in the end didn't come down to Lewis and Nico. I think Mercedes will have it, but I don't expect it to be certainly to quite the same degree as in 2014.
Sure.
I was also one little point. Over the winter we saw Lewis named Sports Personality of the Year in the UK, which, I think there's been a sea change in his public perception over the last year, and I think I'm pleased to see that. I think he seems more, despite the pussycat problem again, he seems more comfortable in his own skin than he used to, and I hope he's potentially, well, in terms of commercially, he's known to be a very successful business sportsman in world terms, but as a popular figure, he deserves to be up there now, and hopefully we'll see that continue this year.
I think sorry, go on, Mark.
Lewis sometimes seems to be a little bit conflicted in how he wants to present himself to the world. That's the observation I would make. But at his core, he's a really nice guy. I can see why he divides opinion so much, because of the way he transmits. But it's false. He's a genuinely nice guy. He's a good guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Simon Arron, looking ahead, starts next week. How do you think it'll go? Will it be between Hamilton and Rosberg, or might it be between Hamilton and somebody else? Actually,
I'm just going to go along with whatever else is. Although, I mean, I can't really see much beyond a Lewis World title, to be honest. I mean, I know we've talked about the potential emotional frailties, but I just there was something about him. Mark mentioned, I mean, last year, his body language, he just seemed to have grown a little within himself. Finally, he seems, the maturity that's been lacking during some of his early Formula One career seemed to be there, and I think having a second title, he might just ride on that. We might just be coming into a sort of a Lewis Hamilton era in the same way as we've had a Sebastian Vettel era for the previous 4 seasons. Not saying that because I have any British bias whatsoever. We often get accused, I'm sure we've all been accused on forums and things, of being, sort of institutional nationalists, but I mean, I really don't give a monkey's whether a driver's got, whether gender, race, anything else. I mean, they've got green skin and 2 heads and come from the planet Zerg.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind. But I just think, as a package at the moment, Lewis ticks all the boxes.
Tough to argue with that, I must say. Okay. Good. Well, we'll be. Mark Hughes will certainly be reporting on all this in enormous detail, which is great. And Nigel will be looking down on it from above and giving us his wisdom, which is just as good. And I hope you'll all continue to read Motorsport magazine throughout the whole year, every month. We want you to buy it, read it every month. Keep listening to our podcast. Thank you very, very much for all your questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question, so keep them coming in. And we'll see you for our next one, which will be in about a month's time. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.